The Houston Texans were supposed to fade after that 0-3 start. Yet right now, they are the team that can ruin an entire playoff bracket if you are not ready. 3 losses to open the season dropped their playoff odds to around 14%, and most people outside Houston quietly wrote them off as a fun story that would run out of gas. Instead, they ripped off win after win, climbed to 9-5, stacked 6 straight victories, and pushed those odds up near 95%, while the rest of the conference was still trying to figure out what just happened. This is not a simple hot streak, where a young group gets lucky on a soft schedule. This looks like the moment a franchise shifts from rebuilding to truly dangerous. What makes this run so wild is how fast the perception changed. Once they hit that stretch with Buffalo, Indianapolis, and Kansas City that was supposed to expose them. Coming into that Bills game, they were sitting at roughly a 26% chance to reach the playoffs. And the conversation sounded like a math problem. Maybe they sneak in if everything breaks their way. Then they beat Buffalo under the lights, handled the Colts, went into Kansas City in the cold, and came out with a win that shook up the entire AFC picture. Mix in blowout wins over Tennessee and Baltimore, a 40-point outburst against Arizona, and a defense that keeps opponents stuck in the teens. And you start to see why national voices suddenly talk about Houston as a real Super Bowl threat, rather than a cute underdog. Inside the building, though, there is no victory lap, and that is where the story really flips. DeMeco Ryans keeps hammering the same idea. One game at a time. Control what is in front of you. And this roster has clearly bought into that mindset while the outside world chases playoff charts and seed talk. The result is a team that feels calmer at 9-5 than it did in panic mode at 0-3. A group that expects to win tough games instead of hoping to. But if you really want to understand why the Texans look this dangerous right now, you have to look past the record and into the one thing that changes everything in this league: the rise of CJ Stroud and the strange way people still talk about him. But before we get into that, hit that like and subscribe button for more Texans and all the NFL content. Let's aim for 500 likes on this video. The Houston Texans have a quarterback story that does not match the way people talk about it, and that gap is where the real drama lives. You still see people online throw around the word overrated when they talk about CJ Stroud, like they have not watched a single snap from this season. The shocking part is, he is not some new name trying to prove he belongs. He has already gone on a playoff run, already walked into loud stadiums and made big throws with everything on the line. Yet somehow, the loudest takes act, like he is just along for the ride, while the rest of this roster carries him. And that might be the most misleading part of the whole Texan story. Look at what he actually does when the lights are bright. Against Arizona, he completed 22 of 29 passes for 260 yards and 3 touchdowns. And on throws, past the first down marker, he went 9 of 11 for 173 yards and 3 scores with a perfect rating on those plays. His full-day passer rating sat around 136.6, one of his best marks since that crazy early stretch in his rookie year. For the season, he sits at 15 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, even after missing time. And this is the same quarterback who already beat a playoff defense last year before losing to Patrick Mahomes and a Kansas City team that went on to the Super Bowl. The idea that this is some unproven kid leaning on an easy scheme falls apart the second you actually walk through his games, start to finish. So why does the noise around CJ Stroud still sound so off? Part of it is simple. A lot of fans, and even some analysts, still do not bother locking in on Houston until the standings force them to pay attention. Part of it is his style. He is calm, he does not chase highlight throws just to go viral, he just keeps stacking sharp reads and clean drives, which does not always cut through the shouting until the season is almost over. But if you are building a team for January, this is the exact type of quarterback you want. Steady when it gets ugly, fearless when the pocket closes, and always ready for one more big throw. And the wild thing is this: even if you strip all of that away and pretend he is only solid, the Texans would still be terrifying. Because the side of the ball that really changes everything is the defense that keeps slamming the door on people week after week. The Houston Texans defense is the part of this story that keeps offensive coordinators up at night, because it closes windows before quarterbacks even finish their drop. In a league where scores keep climbing, this group is holding teams to around 16.3 points per game, which is flat out ridiculous in the 2025 era. They do not just survive games, they squeeze the life out of drives, force long third downs, and turn every mistake into a chance for a turnover. What nobody is talking about enough is how rare it is to see a unit this young play with that level of control. Like they already understand they are built for cold weather, football, and long playoff runs. At the center of it all is Will Anderson, who is not just good, he is changing how offenses call games. He sits near the top of the league with around 10.5 sacks. But the sack total is not even the wildest part. The crazy number is a pressure rate over 21% and a splash play rate around 21.5%, which means roughly 1 out of every 5 snaps he does something that tilts the field. Add in Danielle Hunter, crashing from the other side. Interior help that was rock solid before injuries to Mario Edwards and Tim Settle. And a second level full of hitters like Aziz, Al Shire, EJ Speed, and Henry To'oTo'o, who fly to the ball. Behind them, you have Derek Stingley locking down his side, Kamari Lassiter making plays on the ball, and Jalen Pitre. And suddenly you see why national reports keep calling this one of the most physical defenses in football. The scary part is that this standard has become normal inside the building for Houston, to the point where holding Arizona to 20 points in a 3-score win still left defenders annoyed about missed chances. That is the mindset that gives an offense freedom, because they know the defense will give them short fields, extra possessions, and time to figure things out. And that is exactly where this gets even more interesting, because while everyone is focused on the stars on defense, the Texans have quietly reshaped the other side of the ball with a tougher offensive line, a more creative plan from Nick Caley, and a run game that suddenly looks ready to bully people when the weather turns. The Houston Texans used to feel like a defense-first story, but now the offense is starting to carry its own kind of threat, the kind that makes tired defenses quit in the fourth quarter. Early in the year, the line looked shaky, protections broke down, and everything felt a little rushed for CJ Stroud. Now the pocket looks calmer, the run lanes are clearer, and you can see the confidence building with every long drive. It is not flashy for the sake of being flashy. It is quiet control at the line of scrimmage that slowly breaks an opponent. And that shift has completely changed how teams have to prepare for Houston. Credit here starts with Nick Caley and a front five that has grown up fast. You see extra big bodies like Blake Fisher checking in as a 6th lineman, helping seal edges and giving CJ Stroud those extra beats to scan the field. You see heavier looks in short yardage, creative motions in the red zone, and smart calls that marry the run and pass so nothing feels predictable. When this group clears 100 rushing yards, the scoreboard tilts in a hurry, and Houston pushes into the low 30s on offense, which is exactly what you want behind a top defense. This is not just about calling cute plays, it is about building a style that travels, with a line that can fire off the ball and protect the quarterback in cold weather games when everything tightens. What makes this even more dangerous is who that line is starting to unlock behind it, because the skill group does not look the same as it did a year ago. Backs like Woody Marks, Jawhar Jordan, Nick Chubb, and Dare Ogunbowale all bring different flavors to the ground game, while wideouts and return threats like Jalen Nall and Jaden Higgins are waiting to be used even more in space. The more Nick Caley leans into that mix, the more this offense turns from steady to explosive, and that is where the real surprise might come. Because if the starters need rest or someone goes down, Houston is not just plugging holes anymore, they have a wave of young talent ready to turn a so-called depth chart into a real problem for every defense that lines up across from them. The Houston Texans might be hiding the most dangerous part of this whole run right in plain sight, because the guys behind the stars are starting to look like starters themselves. While defenses spend the week stressing over CJ Stroud in the front 7, fresh legs are waiting who can flip a drive in one snap. You saw it when Woody Marks left with that ankle issue and the ground game did not fall apart. It actually stayed explosive. That is not normal for a team that was fighting just to block anybody last season. When your so-called depth pieces come in and the offense still feels fast and confident, it tells you something bigger is going on with the roster build. In Houston, the best example is Jawhar Jordan, who walked into his first regular season action and ran like he had been in this league for years. In that Cardinals game, he ripped off 101 yards on 15 carries, including a 50-yard burst that showed real pop and set a franchise mark for all-purpose yards in a rookie debut. Teammates like Kamari Lassiter were not shocked at all, because they had already seen him blow up kick returns and workouts before he ever put on a Texans jersey on Sunday. When you combine that kind of burst with a healthy Woody Marks and a proven closer like Nick Chubb working through those rib issues, you are looking at a backfield that can hit you with power, vision, and pure speed without ever asking one player to carry the whole load. That matters in December and January, when one rolled ankle can end a season if you do not have real answers behind your main guy. Then there is the special teams spark that is begging to spill over into the offense. Jalen Noel has already ripped off a 69-yard kick return and piled up the Texans' rookie record for return yardage. Yet he still barely sees the field on offense, even though every touch looks dangerous. Pair him with fellow rookie wideout Jaden Higgins, mix in creative sets with Blake Fisher as the extra blocker, and suddenly the so-called backups look more like hidden starters waiting for their moment. Even on defense, you have players like Jamal Hill turning a kickoff into a forced fumble that swings a game, which is exactly the kind of play that breaks an opponent that is already on the ropes. The real test now is simple. How will all of this young energy look when it lines up against proud stars like Max Crosby and Brock Bowers, who are fighting to prove the Raiders are not just another easy step on the Texans' path? The Las Vegas Raiders step into this game with a record that screams rebuilding mode. But the part that can catch a team off guard is the pride still sitting in that locker room. They are coming off a brutal loss where they were shut out 31-0 and managed only 75 total yards against Philadelphia. And their offense has been stuck around 14 points per game. On top of that, the season has been shaped by mixed visions between Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly, constant change on offense, and a fan base already dreaming about the top pick in the draft. But while people on the outside talk about future quarterbacks and mock drafts, the players on the field are fighting for contracts, roles, and respect, and that is exactly when a struggling team can swing one game that nobody saw coming. Even with all the problems, the Raiders still have stars who can flip moments in a heartbeat. Max Crosby is a nonstop problem off the edge, a leader who plays every snap like it is his last and can wreck a drive with one rush if Blake Fisher and the rest of the Houston line lose focus for a single play. Brock Bowers is a weapon at tight end who can stress linebackers and safeties down the seam. And that matters after the way Trey McBride hurt coverage units across the league. So eyes will be on how Derek Stingley, Kamari Lassiter, and Jalen Pitre handle those matchups. In the backfield, Ashton Genty has shown he can catch and run when he actually gets space, while speed threats like Trey Tucker can test communication in the slot if the rush does not get home. Add in veterans like Geno Smith or Kenny Pickett trying to salvage their seasons, and you get an offense that might be inconsistent, but still has just enough playmakers to punish lazy defense. Where this really turns into a test for the Houston Texans is in the trenches and in the mindset. That Raiders front has given up 54 sacks, with replacements like Stone Forsythe, DJ Glaze, Jackson Powers-Johnson, Colton Miller, Alex Kappa, and Dylan Parham, all taking hits and shuffling roles, which seems like a dream matchup for Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter, and the interior rush. But if Houston walks in thinking this is a free win, one strip sack from Max Crosby, or one busted coverage to Brock Bowers can drag this into an ugly four-quarter fight. DeMeco Ryans has been hammering the one-game approach all year, and this is the exact week where that mindset gets tested, because the Texans cannot afford to look past a proud roster towards seeding and tiebreakers. And that is where the stakes really jump, because the way they handle this kind of trap spot will decide how strong their position is in the AFC race that we are about to break down. The Houston Texans are sitting in the rare sweet spot where everybody else in the AFC is starting to worry about them more than they worry about anyone else. When national voices start saying they fear this defense more than the Buffalo offense, you know the narrative has flipped from cute story to real threat. Right now, other teams and fan bases are not asking if Houston sneaks into the bracket. They are asking what happens if the road to their season runs through this group. That is the shift. From chasing others to being the problem nobody wants to draw in January. If you walk through the playoff math, the picture gets even more wild. Beat the Raiders and the Texans push their playoff chances up around the 98% mark, while giving themselves roughly a 44% shot to open the postseason at home. Stack a win over the Chargers on top of that, and the odds to host jump north of 60%, with a near lock on a spot in the field. Run the table against Las Vegas, Los Angeles, and Indianapolis, and the models give them roughly a 75% chance to bring a wildcard opponent into Houston instead of flying on opening weekend. The crazy twist is that even in the worst case, where they only grab one win out of the last three, the simulations still have them sitting between 83 and 99% to get in, depending on which game they take. One more victory almost seals it, 2 wins tighten their seed. 3 wins put them in position to steal multiple home dates if the rest of the conference stumbles. All of that would just be numbers if this roster was built like a dome track team. But the Texans are constructed for ugly fields and cold breath in the air. CJ Stroud came out of Ohio State. Nico Collins sharpened his game at Michigan. Jaden Higgins learned to battle in the wind at Iowa State. And they now operate behind a line and a defense that thrive on contact. They have already shown they can walk into loud outdoor stadiums late in the year and keep their identity, leaning on a run game that travels and a physical defense that does not care about the weather or the crowd. That is why this year feels wide open for them, with the Jaguars, Broncos, Bills, Chargers, Patriots, and others all trading blows while Houston quietly holds a path that can lead to both seeding and real momentum. The only thing left to sort out is how they manage these final weeks, how they balance rest and risk for guys like Woody Marks, Nick Chubb, Derek Stingley, and Will Anderson, because those choices will decide whether this great position turns into a deep run or just a what if. The Houston Texans are now in a spot where the biggest calls are not about play design, they are about who you are willing to risk on the field. You look at key pieces like Woody Marks with that ankle, Nick Chubb dealing with ribs, Derek Stingley managing his core, Kamari Lassiter coming off a foot scare, EJ Speed working back, and a star like Will Anderson, who has taken shots to the chest and even the eye. On top of that, the interior has already lost Mario Edwards and Tim Settle for the year, so every snap for the remaining big men matters. This is where a smart staff asks a hard question before a game like the Raiders. Matchup: do you push banged up starters just to prove a point, or do you treat this as the moment where you protect their legs and trust the rest of the roster? That is where the depth audition gets real, because Houston has backups who have already flashed and now need real defensive and offensive snaps, not just cameos. Jamal Hill just changed the game with a violent forced fumble on special teams, and seeing him at linebacker in real series would show how much he can handle in January. In the back end, players like Miles Bryant, Kevon Wallace, and Jamarcus Ingram are fighting to prove they can hold the safety spot steady until Jalen Reed is ready and while the team waits to see what happens with Jimmy Ward. On offense, more touches for Jawhar Jordan, more designed work for Jalen Noel, and extended time with Blake Fisher in heavy sets would let the staff find out who stays calm when the game slows down and the hits get nastier. The goal is simple: walk into the playoffs, knowing exactly which so-called reserves are ready to step in, without the level dropping. All of this feeds into one big question that only the fan base can really answer. How much trust do you actually have in this 9-5 group right now? If 1 is no faith at all, and 10 is total belief that the Texans lift the Lombardi, where do you honestly fall when you look at CJ Stroud, this defense, and the growing list of impact role players? The front office and coaches are treating every week like a chance to sharpen the depth and keep the stars healthy for the real fight that is coming. So as this team steps into a game that looks easy on paper but carries huge long-term risk and reward, drop your number, explain why you picked it, and get ready. Because how Houston handles this stretch will tell us if this turnaround is just a fun season or the start of something much bigger.